7 and 8 of this dozen-page document, they talked exactly about this very point, that there's a structural deficit in Ontario. That means we spend more than we take in annually. And it's masked over by this vast amount of one-time sale. Speaker, I ask, what happens, not next year or the year after, because we know you've got $5.7 billion more in asset sales planned. Again, we call that selling the furniture to heat the home. So what happens at the year after the next election, when we're out of assets to sell in the province of Ontario? That's what this is all about, Speaker. It's all about trying to give the illusion that the budget is balanced to carry us through the next election, and then, I don't know, a Hail Mary pass, I presume, is pretty much all they're asking for. So now we know, Speaker, that the Hydro One sale is purely to mask the deficit. And, Speaker, that tells us the problem in Ontario when we read this budget and see the shell game that they've played. They've done that, Speaker, because life is harder in Ontario under the Liberal government. Life is certainly on Thursday afternoon got more expensive in the province of Ontario under the Liberal government. Again, they use these shiny objects to distract from the fact that they're about to make everything in the province more expensive. Speaker, this is a give and take budget. Nothing in this budget gives without taking something else away. You'll see some examples. And again, Speaker, it's all because there's no money left in the kitty. After 13 years of reckless spending, these Liberals are attempting to balance the books on the backs of children, families, and seniors. You're going to see that here as I lay that out, Speaker. Speaker, our debt has grown by 91% in less than 10 years to more than $300 billion. This is the highest rate of growth of any federal or provincial government in all of Canada. Again, Speaker, this government's fiscal mismanagement means there's less money available to invest in Ontario now and in the future. I know that the member across the aisle in her speech talked about our net debt to GDP. It's almost 40%. That's not very good, by the way. But you heard what she said, and this is where these little buzzwords get used constantly, Speaker. She said, we're going to get it down to pre-recession levels. Well, let's just talk about that for a second, because what that implies, Speaker, is that the recession somehow had something to do with their waste, mismanagement, and scandals. So they always use it. You'll find it in every document. You'll find it in every speech. They always say, oh, we're going to get the debt to GDP down to pre-recession levels. When this government took office in 2003, net debt to GDP was 27%. That's where they want to get to. So, but it doesn't sound very nice to say, we want to get the net debt to GDP back to where it was when we first took office and roared from 27% up to 40%. That doesn't sound very good. So they think, who could we blame this one on? The recession. I remember when I first got elected and Dwight Duncan was the finance minister, and I mean, I was a former mayor. You know, you sit and when you tell people everything, it's supposed to be accurate. But here he is telling us, I'm a brand new member, in his first speech he's telling us the tsunami is why we're out of whack and why our deficit is so high. The tsunami. And I remember turning to my seatmate, who was also brand new, and I said, the tsunami in Japan. Is that what I heard him tell me? That the tsunami is why our budget deficit is so high this year? Yep, that's what we heard. And somehow that tsunami was the excuse back then. But, you know, so you don't want to say we're going to get back to the net to GDP that we first had when we took office and kind of bungled it from there. It just sounds so much better to say the pre-recession net debt to GDP. So you'll hear that. Watch for these little words. It's amazing, the little tiny turn of phrase. I remember when we were first investigating the gas plant scandal, and we had this little turn of phrase as well. We asked a question, how much does it cost the people of Ontario to close these gas plants? And they said, it cost the ratepayer $40 million. But I never tweaked back then. In fact, none of us really did. We thought they meant, everybody, right? Well, they had a fine line between ratepayer and taxpayer. So if you didn't ask the very specific question, but who would ever know to do that there is a difference, it's these little buzzwords that they use. Oh, well, it cost the ratepayer $40 million. We're focused on the $40 million and never realized what they said, ratepayer. So you ask the taxpayer, so what does it cost the taxpayers of Ontario? They always answered, well, it cost the ratepayers $40 million. $40 million's the number. That's how you get caught in the little traps of their buzzwords. So we have to really keep an eye on that, Speaker, because there are plenty of these little buzzwords in this budget. And that is indeed why we have a $308 billion debt coming this year. So let's throw our buzzwords out, Speaker. This is the 9th budget in a row that the Liberals have tabled a multi-billion-dollar deficit. There's a stat for you. I didn't hear that in the budget. And also, this is the first time in the history of any province that the debt is $308 billion, Speaker. This year alone, we will be paying almost $12 billion in interest on that debt. That's astounding, Speaker, that is the money that is going out the door. If interest were a government ministry, it would be the 3rd largest ministry. Health, education, interest. Can you imagine that? I mean, that's shocking to know that that's where we are because of waste, management, and scandal. Speaker, the government is mortgaging our province's future on the backs of our children and grandchildren. Our provincial debt works out to $22,103 for every single person and child living in Ontario. And the Liberals do not have any real solution to balance our budget that does not involve a tax hike, a service cut, or selling more assets. For instance, what you didn't hear in the speech is that Ontario's families will see $1.9 billion more in personal income tax next year. They forgot to mention that massive tax hike that's coming. Again, I did speak already about the fact that they've dipped into our rainy day fund. $850 million came out of that. Should our province experience another downturn, we will be ill-equipped to support families with the services in their time of need, Speaker. So again, this government is making short-term decisions that will have serious implications on our future well-being. It's clear that life is harder under the Liberals. But let's talk about some of the items that are in the budget, printed budget, that you did not hear in the speech. Ontario Research and Development Tax Credit. This is called Jobs for Today and Tomorrow, but let's see what they've done to some of the job creators. Reduce the rate of the Ontario Research and Development Tax Credit from 4.5% to 3.5%. Quietly, don't tell anybody, but our job creators, it just got more expensive. The Ontario Innovation Tax Credit, reduced the rate of that credit from 10% to 8%. That's what we're doing to our job creators. If you want to talk about tax credits that were so critical in Ontario, I remember when they rolled these tax credits out. The Children Activity Tax Credit. The name says it all. It's for children's activity. Your kids' sporting events. Gone. Quietly took the children's tax credit and threw it out the window. Health Healthy Homes Renovation Tax Credit. I was sitting here when they rolled that one out, and they had the video with the seniors and how great this was going to be and what a wonderful thing this was. Again, it's all about photo ops, it's all about aspiration, and never about the actual operation. So that Healthy Home Renovation Tax Credit that was so important to Ontario only a couple years ago when they rolled it out with photo ops and fanfare, gone. It's cancelled. It's over. Children's tax credit, gone. Seniors tax credit, gone. Education tax credits, here we go. The tax credits are gone. So you did not hear that part of the news. You heard one aspect of education, but you didn't hear the other side of it. So if you're a family living here in the GTA, Northern Ontario, anywhere in Ontario, you have two income earners who each bring home, before taxes, $42,000. You no longer are entitled to the tax credits because $83,000 is the cutoff. So two-income family, $42,000 each, gone. Tax credit, gone. Children's tax credit, senior tax credit, education tax credit, gone. So, Speaker, you've heard me say many times in this speech that life got more expensive for the people of Ontario. But all of these decisions have consequences, Speaker. They all have an effect, a cause and effect. All these aspirational speeches with no operational mechanism put in place, they cost us money. So while we heard the elimination of the $30 drive clean fee, that grabbed the headlines, but what we didn't hear is that fees for driver and vehicle licensing going up, camping in provincial parks, the fees going up, fishing and hunting licenses going up, liquor licenses going up, permits, event permits going up, court applications going up. All of these are now going up. And the sad news is now they're going to be adjusted every year. So this isn't a one-time up. It's now built in, baked in to this desperate budget where I called it in the national media this week, they're looking for nickels and dimes in the couch. That's what it's down to, Speaker. They're jingling, they're taking the cushions out and jingling, looking, praying for nickels and dimes. When you're changing the price of a hunting and fishing license, that affects businesses, Speaker. That affects the livelihood of people in my area in Northern Ontario, Norm's area as well, in Parry Sound, and others. So what does that mean, Speaker? Now, it's interesting that when you're down to that, you're really into the change. And that means, Speaker, that there's less disposable income for people, which means less consumer spending, which means fewer jobs. Now, you may think that's a stretch, Speaker, that charging all these extra fees is somehow going to have lower jobs. Well, Speaker, I tell you that their own budget verifies what I've just said. So again, when you start hiking fees for camping, hiking, fishing, hunting, I should say, it affects the camps and it affects the businesses who are going to hire fewer people. So in the budget, Speaker, if you look back at the 2015 budget, the government was forecasting 78,000 new jobs. But the fall economic statement, they readjusted it down 46,000, down to 46,000, a loss of 32,000 forecasted jobs. Speaker, their own budget acknowledges that they're not going to make their job numbers. When you start dickering with these fees and making life more expensive for everybody, you have less opportunity to create jobs. When you have the highest energy rates in North America, you lose out on jobs. When you have the highest payroll taxes in Canada, you lose out on jobs. So in this budget, where it was originally forecast to have 93,000 jobs created, the new updated number in the budget is 78,000. We're down 15,000 jobs from their forecast. Speaker, in the year after, where they were originally forecasting 99,000, right now we're down to 93,000, a difference of another 6,000 jobs. Speaker, they're forecasting that because of their own policies that they're putting in place, that we're going to lose tens of thousands of jobs in Ontario. Not unlike the Ontario Registered Pension Plan, Speaker, where their own internal documents, which, as I've said in this legislature at least 100 times, that we obtained through the gas plant scandal hearings, they never expected anybody other than insiders in the government to ever see that document. It was confidential advice to the Premier, which we obtained and disclosed properly. They will lose 54,000 jobs, and they knew it when they put that in. It's like, it's only 54,000 jobs. Let's go ahead with it. So last year they predicted a 1.3% upward change in employment. This year in the book, they're now predicting a 1.1% change. Again, we're down a difference of 0.2. So that means something, Speaker. All these things that they're doing affect families. They affect businesses. They affect kids, seniors, students. Nothing more will have more of an effect, however, Speaker, than the cap and trade, proposed cap and trade. So look, climate change is a serious challenge. It requires a credible plan. I don't think there's anybody in this room that's going to disagree with that, Speaker. However, let's hope that this government is not riding on the goodwill of the people who want something legitimately done. Let's hope they're not riding on that goodwill and using those funds for other things. You'd hope that, Speaker, but sadly, of course, we now see in the budget what this really means. First of all, every person in Ontario is going to feel the impact of the Liberal government's cap-and-trade tax each and every single day. The price of home heating is going up, and that means whether you heat with natural gas or propane, for instance, Northern Ontario, hello, going up. The price of gasoline will go up. The price of food will continue to rise as goods and products are shipped throughout the province. The Liberals' cap-and-trade plan provides no details on how or how much their plan will reduce emissions or protect the environment. We continue to see more photo-op environmentalism from this government, Speaker. That's what this is really all about, sadly, very sadly. This is the same government that created a health tax to support health care, but put that money in general revenue and began firing nurses, closing hospital beds. They are the government who implemented the smart meters that were supposed to lower energy costs, which never saved any family a cent, but instead of costing $1 billion to implement, of course, we talked about waste, and mismanagement and scandal, it cost $2 billion to implement. It always takes, Speaker, either the Financial Accountability Officer, the Auditor General, or the OPP to tell us what's really happening here. And that in itself is a sad, sad state of affairs. When you hear one thing from the government, but something completely different from the Financial Accountability Officer, from the Auditor General, and it's always a scathing report. How many times do we have to use the word scathing? Oh, the Auditor General issued a scathing report today. I've never heard one report from the Auditor General that wasn't scathing. Because what they say and what she has told us are two different things. Yeah, it's scathing, because we expected one thing. We expect when the government says smart meters cost $1 billion, that it cost $1 billion. Your Auditor General has to be the one to say, oh, no, I'm sorry to tell you it cost $2 billion. That's not what you like to hear. in a democratic society. And it takes the OPP to tell us the real details. We've heard that, sadly, time and time again, whether it's in the Sudbury bribery scandal or in the gas plant scandal. Speaker, we get the real story from the OPP. Isn't that tragic in the province of Ontario, that that's where we have to get our information, our factual information that you can actually take to the bank? That's shocking. How can this government be trusted to do what it says it's going to do? It's clear that the Premier and the Liberals are trying to exploit the public's goodwill when it comes to the environment and to climate change. Ontarians expect their government will tackle climate change while keeping home heating and gasoline affordable for families. The Liberal government should provide assurance that the revenue from their cap-and-trade plan will be reinvested in families and businesses, not go towards paying for their scandal, their mismanagement, and their waste. So, Speaker, we're going to see over the next year exactly how the money from cap-and-trade will indeed, sadly, be put in general revenue and be used to give the illusion of balancing the budget. We've already saw that in the fall economic statement. They already booked revenue. At that time, $1.3 billion in revenue is booked into general revenue. We saw that. Now that we know the cap-and-trade is up to $1.9 billion, we will be, to the people of Ontario, we say we will be pouring through, combing through these files every day, every week, every month, all year long, to let them know exactly what's happening with that money. And to unmask, Speaker, when this government says we're going to be putting it into this initiative, we will prove to the people that that initiative was already in the budget under another name, and that money will be removed. So yes, they will indeed ostensibly be putting it into that initiative, but taking the money from that initiative and using it for the deficit. That's their plan. You heard it here first, Speaker, just like you heard it here first 2 years ago when we said that's what they will be doing with the Hydro One sale money. And they deny, delete, delay, distract. And, Speaker, they did it. Just like we said they would. It's all because of waste, mismanagement, and scandal that we're in this situation.